Greetings! My name is Aparna Nancharla, and this is Too Hot for Radio. Well, my audio pals, I knew I'd see you back here at the only show bold enough to snatch sizzling stories from right under the noses of public radio listeners and then deliver these depraved little nuggets to our very own hot and bothered podcast audience. Thank you for the ongoing support, and more importantly, for your underlying hot and botheredness. Luck is a weird concept. Sometimes, for no apparent reason, the universe showers you with some unlikely magic. Say, a good parking spot when you least expect it. I'm in LA now, so my primary concerns involve vehicles and where they idle. Or conversely, the universe showers you with an unexpected shitstorm, i.e. there's no parking spot within a mile of your favorite kombucha emporium. As an Angelina, my secondary concerns now involve purveyors of fermented beverages, succulents, and vibes. That seems to be the way for the majority of people. You mostly get by on your own, things are okay most of the time, and then, occasionally, the inexplicable just kind of comes out of nowhere. Good or bad, we write it off as luck. And yet all of us know someone who seems to be born lucky or unlucky. Maybe we celebrate them. Maybe we whisper about them behind their backs. But for whatever reason, the universe seems to constantly deliver surprises to them. Winning lotto tickets, infected cat bites, doing lemon drop shots with Bill Murray when he crashes your wedding, doing lemon drop shots with Randy Quaid when he crashes your wedding. And oh, you've never been taken hostage, but that sure feels like it. And then Randy takes over your IG story somehow and it turns into a whole thing. This week's story is in part about luck. It's about lots of other things too. It was written by Samantha Schweblin for McSweeney's and was performed as part of Selected Shorts' celebration of the 25th anniversary of this mighty indie publisher. Schweblin is also the author of 2 novels and the collection A Mouthful of Birds. Her book Fever Dream was adapted into a Netflix series of the same name. A lot of Schweblin's writing has a kind of dangerous element to it, and that's in this story too. It's kind of a nail-biter, but not for the usual reasons. I don't want to give anything away, so I'll just say this. Warning. This story is going to make you feel a little bit, or maybe a lot of bit, uncomfortable, even while you're laughing. But trust me, you're in safe hands with our reader, Carmen Lynch. She's a comic who has performed stand-up on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon and The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, and has appeared on series including Inside Amy Schumer and Life and Beth. And she has just the right touch with the story. After her reading, we'll talk to her about it. And I'm not just saying this because it's a story that takes place in a speeding car or because Los Angeles requires me to see everything in terms of Teslas and freeways, but buckle up as Carmen Lynch reads Samantha Schweblin's An Unlucky Man.
The day I turned 8, my sister, who absolutely always had to be the center of attention, swallowed an entire cup of bleach. Abby was 3. First she smiled, maybe a little disgusted at the nasty taste. Then her face crumpled in a frightened grimace of pain. When Mom saw the empty cup hanging from Abby's hand, she turned as white as my sister. "Abby, my God," was all Mom said. "Abby, my God." And then it took her a few seconds longer to spring into action. She shook Abby by the shoulders, but my sister didn't respond. She yelled, but Abby still didn't react. She ran to the phone and called Dad, and when she came running back, Abby was still standing there, the cup just dangling from her hand. Mom grabbed the cup and threw it into the sink. She opened the fridge, took out the milk, and poured a glass. She stood looking at the glass, then looked at Abby, then back at the glass, and finally dropped the glass into the sink as well. Dad worked very close by and got home quickly, but Mom still had time to do the whole show with the glass of milk again before he pulled up in the car and started honking the horn and yelling. Mom lit out of the house like lightning with Abby clutched to her chest. The front door, the gate, and the car doors were all flung open. There was more horn honking, and Mom, who was already sitting in the car, started to cry. Dad had to shout at me twice before I understood that I was the one who was supposed to close up. We drove the first 10 blocks in less time than it had taken me to close the car door and fasten my seatbelt. But when we got to the main avenue, the traffic was practically stopped. Dad honked the horn and shouted out the window, "We have to get to the hospital! We have to get to the hospital!" The cars around us maneuvered and miraculously let us pass, but a couple cars ahead, we had to start the whole operation again. Dad braked in the traffic, stopped honking, and pounded his head against the steering wheel. I had never seen him do such a thing. There was a moment of silence, and then he sat up and looked at me in the rearview mirror. He turned around and said to me, "Take off your underpants." I was wearing my school uniform. All my underwear was white, but I wasn't exactly thinking about that just then. And I couldn't understand Dad's request. I pressed my hands into the seat to support myself better. I looked at Mom, and she shouted, "Take off your damn underpants!" I took them off. Dad grabbed them out of my hands. He rolled down the window, went back to honking, and started waving my underpants out the window. He raised them high while he yelled and kept honking, and it seemed like everyone on the avenue turned around to look at them. My underpants were small, but they were also very white. An ambulance a block behind us turned on its siren, caught up with us quickly, and started clearing a path. Dad kept on waving the underpants until we reached the hospital. They parked the car by the ambulances and jumped out. Without waiting, Mom took Abby and ran straight into the hospital. I wasn't sure whether I should get out or not. I didn't have any underpants on, and I looked around to see where Dad had left them. But they weren't on the seat or in his hand, which was already slamming his car door behind him. Come on, said Dad. He opened my door and helped me out. He gave my shoulder a few pats as we walked into the emergency room. Mom came through a doorway at the back and signaled to us. I was relieved to see she was talking again, giving explanations to the nurses. "Stay here," said Dad, and he pointed to some orange chairs on the other side of the main waiting area. I sat. Dad went into the consulting room with Mom, and I waited for a while. I don't know how long, but it felt long. I pressed my knees together tightly and thought about everything that had happened so quickly and about the possibility that any of the kids from school had seen the spectacle with my underpants. When I sat up straight, my jumper rode up and my bare bottom touched the part of the plastic seat. Sometimes the nurse came in or out of the consulting room, and I could hear my parents arguing. At one point, I craned my neck and caught a glimpse of Abby moving restlessly on one of the cots, and I knew that, at least today, she wasn't going to die. And I still had to wait. Then a man came and sat down next to me. I don't know where he came from. I hadn't noticed him before. "How's it going?" he asked. I thought about saying, "Very well," which is what Mom always said if someone asked her that, even if she just told me and my sister that we were driving her insane. "Okay," I said. "Are you waiting for someone?" I thought about it. I wasn't really waiting for anyone, at least. It wasn't what I wanted to be doing right then. So I shook my head, and he said, "Why are you sitting in the waiting room then?" I understood it was a great contradiction. He opened a small bag he had on his lap and rummaged in it a bit, unhurried. Then he took a pink slip of paper from his wallet. "Here it is. I knew I had it somewhere." The paper was printed with the number 92. "It's good for an ice cream cone, my treat," he said. I told him no. You shouldn't accept things from strangers. "But it's free. I want it." "No." I looked straight ahead and we sat in silence. "Suit yourself," he said, without getting angry. He took a magazine from his bag and started to fill in a crossword puzzle. The door to the consulting room opened again, and I heard Dad say, "I will not condone such nonsense." That's Dad's clincher for ending almost any argument. The man sitting next to me didn't seem to hear it. "It's my birthday," I said. "It's my birthday," I repeated to myself. What should I do? The man held the pen to mark his place in a box on the puzzle and looked at me in surprise. I nodded without looking at him, aware I had his attention again. "But," he said, and he closed the magazine, "sometimes I don't understand women. If it's your birthday, what are you doing in a hospital waiting room?" He was an observant man. I straightened up again in my seat, and I saw that even then I barely came up to his shoulders. He smiled, and I smoothed my hair, and then I said, "I'm not wearing any underpants." I don't know why I said it. It's just that it was my birthday, and I wasn't wearing any underpants. And I couldn't stop thinking about those circumstances. He was still looking at me. Maybe he was startled or offended, and I understood that. Although it hadn't been my intention, there was something vulgar about what I had just said. "But it's your birthday," he said. I nodded. "It's not fair. A person can't just go around without underpants when it's their birthday." "I know," I said emphatically, because now I understood just how Abby's whole display was a personal affront to me. He sat for a moment without saying anything. Then he glanced toward the big windows that looked out onto the parking lot. "I know where to get you some underpants," he said. "Where?" "Problem solved." He stowed his things and stood up. I hesitated, precisely because I wasn't wearing underpants, but also because I didn't know if he was telling the truth. He looked toward the front desk and waved one hand at the attendants. "We'll be right back," he said, and he pointed to me. "It's her birthday." And then I thought, oh, please, Jesus, don't let him say anything about my underpants. But he didn't. He opened the door and winked at me, and then I knew I could trust him. We went out to the parking lot. Standing, I came up to a little bit above his waist. Dad's car was still next to the ambulances, and a policeman was circling it, annoyed. I kept looking over at the policeman, and he watched us walk away. The breeze wrapped around my legs and rose, making a tent out of my uniform. I had to hold it down while I walked, keeping my legs awkwardly close together. He turned around to see if I was following him, and he saw me fighting with my skirt. "We'd better stick close to the wall." "I want to know where we're going." "Don't get persnickety with me now, darling." We crossed the avenue and went into a shopping center. It was an uninviting place, and I was pretty sure Mom didn't go there. We walked to the back toward a big clothing store, a truly huge one that I don't think Mom had ever been to, either. Before we went in, he said to me, "Don't get lost," and gave me his hand, which was cold and very soft. He waved to the cashiers the same way he waved to the desk attendants when we left the hospital, but no one responded. We walked down the aisles. In addition to dresses, pants, and shirts, there were work clothes, hard hats, yellow overalls like the ones trash collectors wear, smocks for cleaning ladies, plastic boots, and even some tools. I wondered if he bought his clothes there and if he would use any of those things in his job, and then I also wondered what his name was. "Here we are," he said. We were surrounded by tables of underwear for men and women. If I reached out, I could touch a large bin full of giant underpants, bigger than any I'd seen before, and they were only 3 pesos. With one of those pairs of underpants, they could have made 3 for someone my size. "Not those," he said. "Here." And he led me a little farther to a section with smaller sizes. "Look at all the underpants they have. Which will you choose, my lady?" I looked around a little. Almost all of them were white or pink. I pointed to a white pair, one of the few that didn't have a bow on them. "These," I said, "but I can't pay for them." He came a little closer and said into my ear, "That doesn't matter." "Are you the owner?" "No, it's your birthday." I smiled. "But we have to find better ones. We need to be sure." "Okay, darling," I ventured. "Don't say darling," he said. "I'll get persnickety." And he imitated me, holding down my skirt in the parking lot. He made me laugh. When he finished clowning around, he held out 2 closed fists, and he stayed just like that until I understood. I touched the right one. He opened it. It was empty. "You can still choose the other one." I touched the other one. It took me a moment to realize it was a pair of underpants, because I had never seen black ones before. And they were for girls because they had white hearts on them. So small they looked like dots, and Hello Kitty's face was on the front, right where there was usually that bow that Mom and I don't like at all. "You'll have to try them on," he said. I held the underpants to my chest. He gave me his hand again, and we went toward the changing rooms, which looked empty. We peered in. He said he didn't know if he could go in with me because they were for women only. He said I would have to go alone. It was logical because unless it's someone you know very well, it's not good for people to see you in your underpants. But I was afraid of going into the dressing room alone, or something worse, coming out and not seeing him there. "What's your name?" I asked. "I can't tell you that." "Why not?" He knelt down. Then he was almost my height, or maybe I was a couple inches taller. "Because I'm cursed." "Cursed? What's cursed?" "A woman who hates me said that the next time I say my name, I'm going to die." I thought it might be another joke, but he said it very seriously. "You could write it down for me." "Write it down?" "If you wrote it, you wouldn't say it. You'd be writing it. And if I know your name, I can call you, and I won't be so scared to go into the dressing room alone." "But we can't be sure. What if this woman thinks writing my name is the same as saying it? What if by saying it, she meant letting someone else know, letting my name out into the world in any way?" "But how would she know?" "People don't trust me, and I'm the unluckiest man in the world." "I don't believe you. There's no way she'd find out." "I know what I'm talking about." Together, we looked at my underpants in my hands. I thought my parents might be finished by now. "But it's my birthday," I said. And maybe I did it on purpose. At the time I felt like I did. My eyes filled with tears. Then he hugged me. It was a very fast movement. He crossed his arms behind my back and squeezed me so tight my face pressed into his chest. Then he let me go, took out his magazine and pen, and wrote something on the right edge of the cover. Then he tore it off and folded it 3 times before handing it to me. "Don't read it," he said, and he stood up and pushed me gently toward the dressing room. I passed 4 empty cubicles. Before gathering my courage and entering the 5th, I put the paper into the pocket of my jumper and turned to look at him, and we smiled at each other. I tried on the underpants. They were perfect. I lifted up my jumper so I could see just how good they looked. They were so very perfect. They fit incredibly well, and because they were black, Dad would never ask me for them, so he could wave them out the window behind the ambulance. And even if he did, I wouldn't be so embarrassed if my classmates saw. "Just look at the underpants that girl has," they'd all think. "Now, those are some perfect underpants." I realized I couldn't take them off now, and I realized something else. They didn't have a security tag. They had a little mark where the tag would usually go, but there was no alarm. I stood a moment longer looking at myself in the mirror, and then I couldn't stand it anymore, and I took out the little paper, opened it, and read it. I came out of the dressing room, and he wasn't where I had left him, but then I saw him a little farther away, next to the bathing suits. He looked at me, and when he saw I wasn't carrying the underpants, he winked, and I was the one who took his hand. This time, he held onto me tighter. We walked together toward the exit. I trusted that he knew what he was doing, that a cursed man who had the world's worst luck knew how to do these things. We passed a line of registers at the main entrance. One of the security guards glanced at us and adjusted his belt. He would surely think the nameless man was my dad, and I felt proud. We passed the sensors at the exit and went into the mall, and we kept walking in silence all the way back to the avenue. That was when I saw Abby, alone, in the middle of the hospital parking lot. And I saw Mom on our side of the street looking around frantically. Dad was also coming toward us from the parking lot. He was following fast behind the policeman who'd been looking at our car before and who was now pointing at us. Everything happened very quickly. Dad saw us, yelled my name, and a few seconds later, that policeman and two others who came out of nowhere were on top of us. The unlucky man let go of me, but I held my hand suspended toward him for a few seconds. They surrounded him and shoved him roughly. They asked what he was doing. They asked his name, but he didn't answer. Mom hugged me and checked me over from head to toe. She had my white underpants dangling from her right hand. Then, patting me all over, she noticed I was wearing a different pair. She lifted my jumper in a single movement. It was such a rude and vulgar thing to do. Right there in front of everyone, that I jerked away and I had to take a few steps backward to keep from falling down. The unlucky man looked at me and I looked at him. When Mom saw the black underpants, she screamed, "Son of a bitch! Son of a bitch!" And Dad lunged at him and tried to punch him. The cops moved to separate them. I fished for the paper in my jumper pocket, put it in my mouth, and as I swallowed it, I repeated his name in silence several times so I would never forget it. Thank you.
That's Carmen Lynch, everyone. Carmen Lynch.
Hi.
Hi, Carmen.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Okay, so we can jump right in. When you first read An Unlucky Man, what were your first impressions? Like, what did it make you think or feel? It feels like it has quite an impact for the reader.
Yeah, I was immediately like hooked. I was like, what's going to happen? I mean, my brain goes to like worst case. So I was like, at first I'm like, this kid is going to die from the bleach. And then it was the fact that they weren't going to get to the hospital. So he had to like hang the underwear out the window. But I mean, the whole time, as a comedian, it's like you have these situations that are very like troublesome, but you're captivated. And then the author adds this kind of, I don't know, there's like a humorous tone underneath all of it because it is underpants. It's kind of ridiculous,
Yeah, and then I feel like
yeah.
the kids' reactions kind of give it, like it takes some of the edge off. I think.
Yeah. There's like an innocence too in
Yes.
the writing because it's this child's point of view where it's like, yeah, but it's my birthday. Like,
Right. Right.
it's how we think when we were kids, and it's just very captivating.
Yeah, and in that sense, how did you decide on your approach to reading it? Like, did you feel like you wanted to lean into, the childlike perspective, but like you're saying that it's also, there were so many hard turns.
I guess that's so funny because I wasn't trying to be funny. I think I just related to this child because I've written old stuff, like stuff that's happened to me in this kind of point of view of an innocent child. And I just related to that point of view. I think there's a very childlike part of me that I was like, oh my God, I get this. I would have done the same thing. Like, why my underpants? Like,
right.
like that kind of thing. And then I feel like it took a more of a serious turn when she met the man at the hospital.
Yes.
And then I was like, okay, this is not funny. Where is this going to go? And I was like, oh, thank God she's okay. I wasn't like, this has to be funny because it's so serious. I think it just how I interpreted the tone of the story.
I like that you kind of related it to like previous writing you had done as a comedian. Because did you feel like as a comedian you kind of knew how to pace this better or deliver certain parts better? It felt like, I don't know, hearing your reading of it, I was like, I feel like the pacing was perfect.
Oh, thank you. I think, doing stand-up helps, but I also wrote I wrote about in the last, I would say since COVID, I've written about 300 pages of like a
wow.
memoir of old stories that I want to, I mean, I still have to reread it and edit it and everything, but I think writing old stories from my childhood actually kind of put me in that place more than I expected.
For
Yeah.
sure. And were you worried at all about the audience, their reaction to the story, and like if they were going to shut down at some point? Because there are a lot of moments like when she leaves the hospital with the man with no underwear on, like where you're just like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think if anything, I knew I'd have their attention, but I was surprised that they continued to like laugh, not
Yeah.
laugh at the situation, but laugh with me, like, at the tone and the story. Like, in a way, I'm happy for that because it kept it light. It wasn't like too heavy of a story.
It was kind of incredible because I had read the story before, like I had read her book before, and then when I heard you read it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, Carmen's reading is like such a less stressful version of the story." Because when I read it, I was so stressed out.
Yeah, it's funny how
Yeah.
that can happen because I told my boyfriend, I was like, you have to read this story. You're just hooked on it immediately. And he's like, what's it about? And I started telling him, but it's not the same if you're not reading it.
Yeah,
He's like, I don't want
totally.
to read that. Like, that sounds awful. And I'm like, no, no, no. It's actually it's so well written.
So Samantha Schweblin, the author, is Argentinian. I know you're a bilingual performer, you're a woman of many talents. Did you sense anything in the translation that carried something of like the original Spanish with it? Like, did you feel that at all?
No, I didn't realize it until she said, I think it was the price of the underwear was like in pesos.
Oh, got it.
And then I was like, oh, okay. So this is not happening in the United States. Like, I had no idea. And I want to read more of her stuff because I just wasn't familiar with her.
Yeah, for sure. Those are all the questions I had for you, unless there's anything you want to add.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Carmen. And that's that. Yes, I recognize that the unlucky man featured in The Unlucky Man might also be a creep, and that the title involves some ambiguity, that maybe it reflects the label the guy gives himself, or the childlike perspective of the kid just hoping to be seen by the adults around her. I get it. That guy is not exactly your cousin Trey, who, no matter how carefully he looks for yellow curbs, always gets a parking ticket. But that's the beauty of it. Schweblin spares our narrator, but not without making us squirm. Not unlike walking back from brunch with Cousin Trey and finding out that, yes, waiting patiently on the windshield of his Prius is Randy Quaid. Our show is produced by Jennifer Brennan and Mary Shimkin. Our podcast producer and editor is Colleen Pellissier. This episode was recorded by Miles B. Smith. Matthew Love is our consulting producer. Our theme song is by Poddington Bear. I'm Aparna Nancherla. Thanks for joining us for Selected Shorts Too Hot for Radio.